Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Gray Area.
Good evening, everyone.
So glad that you guys have joined us tonight. So we're going to get started with our Gray Area prayer. Tashura.
The prayer for Gray Area. Lord, please open my mind to new ideas, possibilities, and perspectives. Give me the ability to discern the truth. Help me to connect with others despite our differences. Lord, let me not lean on my own understanding. Lord, we invite you into this conversation. Have your way.
So I'll go into our Gray Area introduction. Have you ever thought to yourself, what is God's perspective on my situation? Does it align with His? Do I see these things the same way God wants me to? Introducing the Gray Area. The Gray Area is designed to challenge your thinking. Many times we don't realize it, but the way we are raised, the things our parents taught us, school, society, and life experiences all play a part in how we think and perceive things. Perception is everything. We're both mothers, wives, daughters, friends, ordinary women, yet our one goal and our one desire is to please God. Integrate His ways and His perspectives into our lives. This isn't always easy, especially when we have been programmed to think a certain way. However, God has purposed us to challenge ourselves and others on their belief system. Does it align with His? We often try to see things black and white, wrong and right, good and bad, but this thing called grace and love doesn't always allow us to see things so simple. Everyday conversations, discussions, and situations through the lens of God is our prayer. We invite you to listen to our conversation and chime in. Perspective matters. So I just thank you guys once again for tuning in to tonight's discussion. If you would like to contribute your perspective or you have questions, please hit star 6 and you'll be placed in the queue. We'll be able to take your call from there. So I have the privilege tonight of setting the table for today's conversation. And, you know, I'm just going to come from a very transparent place. I think it kind of stems from Tashura and I having a very general conversation. And if many of you don't know, I'm a director of a preschool. And we were having an end-of-the-year outing. And we were supposed to go out to eat. And long story short, I'm also a pastor at my church, the Excelling Church. And one of the reasons, you know, I was kind of contemplating on going was, you know, it's my staff. How would they perceive me, et cetera, et cetera. And so I went, and then I left, and I remember talking to Tashura about, you know, the fact that there was alcohol there, and we somehow got on the discussion of, like, should pastors drink? What does the Bible say about that? And then it kind of led into a conversation about just in general of how as leaders we're kind of held to like a certain standard, you know, and I also wanted to mention that, you know, even though I went to the dinner with my staff, they said once I left, they were able to turn up, which means that they were able to let their hair down and like have fun. And, you know, once again, you know, it kind of made me think or reflect as, you know, a leader, how sometimes people put you in this space or put you in a place of, you know, expecting more from you. So, you know, in tonight's conversation.
So I'll pose the question, should leaders be held at a different standard than you hold for yourself? We also want to pose a secondary question that says, do people hold Christians or Catholics or people who say that they're followers of Christ to a higher standard? So,
what are your thoughts about that, Tashura?
You know, it's crazy because I kind of been all over the place, you know, because I think in general I would say, yes, people hold leaders to a higher standard, right? But if the question ended where it said, do people hold leaders to a higher standard, my answer probably would have been a definitive yes. But because we added that little piece at the end where it says, then ourselves, I would have to say no, because I don't think I hold any of, you know, anyone to a higher standard than I hold myself. I think I hold myself to, you know, any standard that I would put on somebody else. So the same standards that I would put on, you know, myself, that's kind of where I'm limited. I can't put you any higher than I would put myself, as far as standards go, so I hold myself to the same standards as leaders. However, I do feel the majority they hold leaders to a higher standard. They look at you as the example, like the example should be set by the leader, period, in any situation. So whether you're the pastor, whether you're the director, whether of an organization, whether you're the president of the United States, I would say the consensus is that people generally hold the leader to the highest standard, and they're scrutinizing every single move that they make.
And, just to be transparent, it's interesting. I remember when I first started at my company, we had like a Christmas party. And I remember, like, all of the top executives were, like, drinking and, just having fun and dancing on the dance floor. And all of the other employees were like, oh, my God, did you see so-and-so? And for them, it was just, like, so, like, different for them to see someone of, maybe, I guess, someone in power or authority acting, I guess, to me, what is normal. I don't know what people's expectations of someone that is in leadership, the expectation that they too would have fun. But, I just thinking back to that night, staff really, they were scrutinizing. They were kind of like, oh, my God, did you see the way or what she's wearing? And I'm just like, after having this discussion with you the other day, it kind of made me think about that night. And I was thinking, like, we tend to do that. We tend to, as people, if you hear a pastor in the news, does something, let's say he does something inappropriate, it's like, oh my God, how could he do it? But if your friend said the same thing, it would kind of be a little bit more grace. I feel like people tend to not give leaders the same level of grace that we would kind of extend to someone else. And it's kind of interesting of why we do that. What do you think about that?
Yeah, how did you personally feel about those CEOs or the leaders of the organization drinking and kind of carrying on? How did you feel about it personally?
I think initially I was with I had the same sentiment. I was like, oh my gosh, can you believe her? But it wasn't until I started being thinking a little bit more deeply based on the personal example that I kind of opened up, and I could kind of see that I too sometimes do it, and I think we do it and we don't even recognize it. It's almost like it's a first instinct. There's just certain expectations that we as people put, not that the other person puts, but we have expectations that we have of our leaders. And I guess what I want to challenge our callers tonight is to see if sometimes the expectations that we have, if it's even fair. And I'll even take it a step further. I was having a conversation with someone. I think we even do it at church. I think that a lot of people have been impacted by church hurt, because they have had expectations of how people in the church should behave. And the minute that person does something, or they don't meet those expectations, it changes their feelings about church and it changes their feelings about God. So, I think we walk around with these expectations that we as people bring to the table, not that the other person does. And the minute that person doesn't meet those expectations, sometimes it can really impact us. So I'm hoping that, by having this conversation and being transparent, that we can kind of challenge ourselves in that way. But what do you think about that, Sure?
I was saying, because when you said that, even, we use the word leaders, but for me, when I thought about it, I said, there was somebody that was super important in my life that made a bad judgment, and it completely rocked my world. So I don't know if it's, I guess a leader could be anybody that's supposed to set an example for you. I guess it could be even a parent, or, even, a relative, just anybody that's supposed to set an example for you. And I think that goes right along with the whole, Christian thing, or followers of God, or people who proclaim to, be followers of God, they're supposed to be an example. And I think many people in the world look at people, okay, if you're going to profess that you are a follower of Christ, then you are supposed to be a living example of how we should live. So the minute you fall from that or do something against it, it kind of rocks the whole thing.
So my question is that we have to kind of think to ourselves, why is it okay for us to fall, but for someone else not to fall? We make mistakes every day. But the minute someone else, like you said, or maybe we put someone in that space that they make a mistake, it's something that we have a hard time accepting,
When you say we, you mean we as proclaimers of Jesus Christ?
Yeah, just as people, just even as ourselves. Yeah, we make mistakes every single day. I make mistakes every day. I don't get it right. So I guess my question is, if I recognize that I make mistakes, why is it difficult for me to accept that someone else can make mistakes? Even though they may have a leadership title. You know what I mean? I just don't know if we're always so forgiving of people in those roles, or like you said, and a parent is a leader. But
right.
As a child,
right.
They're the ones that are guiding you. So definitely a parent. I think that go ahead.
I was going to say, if we want to really go technical with it, on two sides. One in the, in the just working status and how you work. When you think about, working or the leadership of the organization and just the setup of it, and how the brunt of what happens at work or the brunt of what happens in an organization falls on the shoulders of the leader. So they are held to this expectation that, that they're kind of like the fall guy, and their way is pretty much setting the precedence for everybody else, and how, they do take the brunt of it. So, and even from the perspective, so that's one side when you're in, a leadership role, but when you're in the church also, the Bible talks about that, be careful not to be a master in God's house or a teacher in God's house, because you will be judged more harshly than everyone else. It says that in James. I think it's James something. So, to me, it's okay, if it says that in the Bible, there's standards also held up at work and in any other, setting that's structural, then I think maybe just by the structure of things, us as human beings might just be following that suit just because of how it's set up. I don't know. That's
no, I hear you. No, I hear you. I think that we have a call in the queue. I think that the Bible definitely sets the tone that, be careful once you choose this, because you're held at, you're more accountable. So, I recognize that. I guess I'm alluding to, I'm going to let the caller into,
okay,
the expectation that we necessarily put, is it fair or unfair? I see you, caller. Yeah, you want to let them in?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Hi, caller.
Hi, guys. I just wanted to make a comment real quick and maybe just give you guys my scenario of what happened to me. When I moved, I remember going to a church and I saw in their bulletin board that they were looking for a therapist, and I decided, okay, I will actually, volunteer and do it for free. And I remember sending them an email requesting, an interview to come in, and so that they can, talk to me. And the guy asked me for all my credentials, and I gave it to him, and he told me I was a fantastic fit. But unfortunately, because they didn't see me in their tithing records, I could not participate and work for them for free. So I then explained to them that I just moved there and I don't work as yet because I haven't really found anything, to do as yet. But my first thing to do was to find a church. And his explanation was, until you start tithing to our church, unfortunately, we will not be able to give you a position. And so for me, I felt like that came from the top, because I feel like the shepherd leads the flock. And so where the sheep are coming to me and saying to me, listen, we can't give you a position to work in here, even though you have all of the credentials. We love what you can offer, but until you start tithing to our church and not withhold from God, from this church, we cannot even give you a position. So for me, that was a staple for me in church, and looking at leadership and understanding how the shepherd leads, and always keeping my eye keen on church and church leaders because of that experience.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Thank you for sharing that.
That is harsh.
I still kept his email. Mm-hmm.
That is so harsh. And it's so crazy because you hear those stories about I hear this saying church hurt, and I hear people say things like that, and that is something that is very harsh. It's very harsh. It's nothing else for me to.
That's terrible.
What do you think about that?
Yeah. Those things happen, and there are a million people, I feel, that have experienced similar situations where they've been hurt to the point that they don't even want to deal with church. And, I guess my question is, is it some people allow that to stop them, from those experiences, they allow those situations to stop them from attending church at all. And it sometimes impacts their relationship with God.
Yeah.
Whereas I'm wondering if, and there's like a lot of churches like that, but I'm wondering if we can sometimes separate and recognize that there are a lot of people that feel like they have it together, or churches feel like they have it together, but they really don't. And that they're imperfect, and recognizing that in their imperfection, that there's still grace in all of that. And what I mean from that is that, sometimes people will never step in church again based on that one experience, similar to what Tommy has described, because they've had expectation that if this is this institution, that this institution must, get it right. I mean, it's a church, for God's sake. But what I'm saying is there's a million churches all across the world that don't get it right, that we have an expectation that it will. And all I'm saying is sometimes we allow those situations to stop us, and is it fair based on our expectations for it to stop us? If you follow what I mean.
I heard somebody. I heard not even just somebody. I've heard this a few times where people will make comments that they dislike church people, or they hate church people. Like I've heard that. On several occasions, just because of the judgment that they feel coming from, a certain group of people that say that they, and I always say, like, is it all? Is it always all? But, I see where certain situations can make people fall into that, and unfortunately it does, derail some people. But you gave me a really good analogy when I first started coming to church, and you said to me, which I thought was great, and I still hold it to me, you said that I should look at church and others should look at church as a hospital, not as like where everyone has it all together, but more so a hospital. Do you want to talk about it a little bit?
Yes, I remember.
Because I like it.
You
said that.
Yeah, a long time ago, because I've experienced, similar to Tommy, a lot of situations. I have a lot of situations where I've sat into church and they've passed the offering a million times, and, just things that were just, like, not right. And I guess one day, I can't remember who it was, they kind of framed it for me to where I could understand. They said that church is like a hospital with people that need help. And, I think that it was so interesting because we tend to think of a church where people have it together, but in actuality they don't. And I'll be the first one to say that I don't have it all together. I just think that part of the cycle is that people think they have it together, but they really don't, and those are part of the hurt people. They are totally not reflective of where they really are, and in that they end up hurting other people. You know what I mean? And so once I looked at that analogy as like a hospital, I'm like, it totally makes sense. I mean, you have sister so-and-so who's overcompensating for whatever. You have this person who is like struggling with this, but, you know, many times they don't see it that way, you know, and so I thank God for a place like Excelling Church where you kind of see and our pastor embraces the imperfection. And kind of like what I was talking to you today is like in the Bible there was no perfect person. Like that's why God had to do this whole redemption thing because we are all imperfect. And what I was saying to you on the phone earlier today is that I think for me sometimes I have to check myself and not put my own expectations on people. Like I had to stop putting an expectation on church and on how I feel like my supervisor should behave. And the minute that I stopped doing that, when my supervisor or someone at church did something, it didn't impact me the same way because I realized that there's still a person at the end of the day. Yes, I do agree that there should be a way that, you know, our leaders should conduct themselves. But what I'm saying is I recognize that I was walking around holding my own expectations of church and what people in church should look like and how it should respond. And the same thing with, you know, like I said, people in leadership positions. I had an expectation that they would dress a certain way. You know, my supervisor does not dress like how a typical business suit person. And I had to get these things. I had to be totally reflective and check myself and say, no, there are no, I shouldn't put those expectations out there that way.
Right. Right. That's so true, though. That's so true. So now even in our conversation, I'm here like just thinking, and I'm saying, should we be on an even playing field just as far as people go? I hear that we have leadership roles, but it just in general as far as people that we should kind of make, you know, what's the
even
word?
Even the people in the Bible who follow Christ, like they all had their thorns, as Paul likes to say, or things that they struggle with. And
yeah, and that's why I think even a part of the Bible they say like we should make provisions for our brothers. You know what I mean? Like we all will fall. We're not perfect. So not to say that leaders, like you said, shouldn't have a level of accountability, but as far as how we see them, you know, like we all have our struggles, you know. So
and I think that, you know, because of these expectations, there's so many people that suffer in silence because they're like, I have to look a certain way, I have to be a certain way, and if I don't have this picture perfect thing, you know, what are people going to think of me? And I think that so many of us we don't have the freedom that we need to have because of these expectations that, you know, other people place on us. So, you know, it's just interesting.
Sorry, go ahead. We have interesting.
No, I said it's just an interesting perspective to kind of frame it. I think we have another caller in queue.
Yeah.
Want to pick it up, or you want me to do it?
Yep. Okay. No, I got it. Hi, caller.
Hi. I just have a comment to make about the question is, are leaders supposed to be held at a higher standard than workers? Well, leaders are leaders for a reason. And you have various type of leaders and various type of expectations. Because basically, if you're a leader of a group, you are a person that can give command, and you have followers, you know, expecting that your followers would obey you, so you get the task done, right? A leader is supposed to be someone that has a little bit more experience than the regular employee. We're not looking for leaders only because of how they dress or their characters, but their ability to function in the area that they are placed in as leaders. So just being a leader, yes, is going to be held at a higher standard because that person is supposed to be, I would say, have a little bit more expertise than the regular workers. And so as a pastor, yes, he's a leader. He's supposed to guide his flock. As a principal, yes, you're going to be there so you can answer the questions of the teachers and follow the guideline of the state. So, of course, a leader has to be held at a higher esteem. Now, when we talk about morals, the leader doesn't have to possess morals because that doesn't qualify them for the job, certain type of morals, you know, but some people just don't have any. but they can do the job. So I don't want to call out any name, but we have leaders right now that we wish they weren't in the position they are because of their type of morals that they have. So, yes, leaders have to be held at a higher standard. All right, that's my
So
comment.
let me
Yes,
before you go, there's two things that I'm hearing, and I think for what you're saying, I think for exactly how you explained it as far as like experience and knowledge, yes, that's the standard that they should be held higher. Or because you're only, you think about
for them to answer the question.
Right. So I agree with that, but I guess what what I was thinking too is just saying to the piece where we're talking about, and maybe it is a moral thing, I don't know, but I think sometimes the expectations are larger than just the experience that the person has. I think a lot of people put, instead of just experience, you would come in now with exact perception of how you think. And everybody comes in with a pre kind of disposition of how you think this leader should conduct themselves. So it's not just simply relying on their expertise, but how they should look, how they should speak, how they should be in an environment with other people. It becomes this whole thing rather than just the experience of the leader, that they have more experience. So we're not just leaning on the experience of the leader, but now we're leaning on how do they look? What did they say? How did they drink? Did they eat too much food? Did they do, it's more than just, and I agree totally with what you're saying, but that's why
so we are adding that. We are adding that criteria of being a leader. Is it our perception of what a leader should be? Or, moral goes a long way in leadership, yes, because if you as a leader conduct yourself in a certain way, definitely your subordinates are going to follow you, right? Because this is the example you put forward. But there are some leaders who can jolly well and do a good job, but they drink, they get drunk, they get, which you don't want to associate with, but when it comes to their job, they're able to perform it satisfactorily. So it's really a topic that needs a lot of discussion and a lot of thinking about. Because when you hire the person, really you're asking some questions about morals, and you would expect them to live up to it. But I don't know. But a leader should be leaders should be held at a higher standard. I do think that way.
Yes.
So that's my thing. So I don't know if it's dressing, because I work at a school. My principal, she does not dress anyway. She comes to school looking like anything, but she can perform. School is a high functional school. She can do her work. So I don't know if she should lose her job because she don't know how to dress. But doing her job and to get the grades up and stuff like that, she does. So, it's two ways about it. I'm saying two things there. But I think the standard that she's held at, she's able to perform it.
I think what you're saying is very valid, and you kind of like answered the question. I think that, I think the conversation is to do, and I thank you for kind of picking it apart. There's the expertise and there's the experience component, and there's the moral, and kind of like to sure we kind of package it all up together, and we kind of say, well, this in our head, this is how my principles should be. We package all of it up. We package everything that you kind of just talked about, and all I'm saying is sometimes I'm wondering if it's justifiable. Like, is it fair,
Right. Oh, it's more than that. But, yeah, I agree. So, in closing, do you want to challenge us with something?
Yes, I think that, hopefully you guys will at least keep the conversation going. And, it's just kind of like a food for thought to kind of consider if we're fair sometimes in our expectations. And, you know, I'm speaking for myself entirely. I realize that sometimes I to answer the question, I do think that, yes, our leaders should conduct them. There's a certain standard that our leaders should conduct. Otherwise, they wouldn't be leaders. So it's not that I disagree with that. But I think mixed in that big bowl is sometimes unrealistic expectations, you know, of how a leader should be. And I think that sometimes we're not, like the dress thing, for example, you know, I had to check myself and say, you know, my AED, she doesn't, you know, in my head, this is probably how she should dress, but it's not necessarily a major component to the job. I think that, once again, that was my expectation on it. And so, you know, tonight's conversation is just meant to kind of evoke some thought and figure out if sometimes we put these expectations, our own personal expectations, in places maybe where they shouldn't be. And I think sometimes we do it to a point where it ends up backfiring on us. I say this with huge sentiment that I think a lot of people are not in church is because they've had these expectations for the church to respond a certain way, maybe to their needs, and they didn't. And, you know, it's sad, but sometimes we have to realize that just like people, there are a lot of imperfect churches with imperfect people, and sometimes we just have to find the right fit. So in tonight's conversation, I hope that you challenge yourself and maybe those around you to kind of think about expectations a little bit more thoroughly. And, you know, if you know people that have maybe been turned away from church based on expectations that they have, to kind of reconsider and help them see that, you know, churches are full of imperfect people. There's a lot of imperfect churches, but not to allow that to hinder them from finding something that might be a right fit for them. Tashura, what are your thoughts?
I think your conclusion was excellent. I think that, yeah, there's a lot of imperfect people, and I think it's really important that people, specifically even with the church and the example Tommy gave, because I think there's a ton of those out there. I think that, you know, it's important to find the right fit because there is the right fit out there. And I think everyone, the same imperfect people that we're walking around with daily are the same exact people that are in church. You know, they just put on, you know, they're now in a different setting. But
and they put on a mask.
Yeah, yep. Mm-hmm. So I definitely would just challenge everybody that's listening to, you know, not let that discourage them from, you know, getting to know God or getting into the right church environment that works for you. And just in general, I think, yes, leaders, I guess, yes, to some degree, a leader, we would hope that they have more experience and all that. But a really, really wise man said to me about 12 years ago that, you know, Tashura, you're going to always be disappointed if you walk around holding everybody to the same standards as you hold yourself. People will fall short. People will disappoint you, you know. So I just think that, you know, we have to just make allowances for each other and maybe not put what we have for ourselves, expecting somebody to react or do the same things that we would hold for ourselves. So I just want to thank everyone for listening tonight. Please email us at thegreyareaconversation@gmail.com with any topics that you'd like us to discuss, as well as any comments that you want to talk about for tonight's topic, as well as follow us, please, on all social media platforms. You can get the link to our podcast there. We're also on YouTube. And we just thank you so much for listening. Have a great night.
Have a great night.